Okay, we might open this to the panel now, and I don't think Ning Ying should be responsible for answering all questions. I mean, she's given us the film already. I think the answers are in the film, actually. I mean, it's up to us to read it. But let me start, okay? Let me start very quickly by taking up this question of memory and Simon Chang's notion of memory skipping a generation. Now, and then linking it to something Gaby was saying, because I read it in a slightly different way. I mean, what he's saying, because it's as if memory itself is always, to a certain extent, built around a blank. I mean, it's this blank in memory that creates what we call memory. I think the technical term for this is pyknolepsy. Right? There's this blank that's gone, whatever you call it, it's like the unconscious, so you build around it. So memory surrounds it as well. So it's a blank that you can never retrieve and never recover. That's why the process keeps going on. And Gaby was saying that in the film, at the beginning, it begins with like black humor, and then it goes on to more serious. And I think that's probably true about the film. Because the film begins as this almost melodramatic, sexual drama. Who slept with my husband? Right? So that's how the film began. But then, of course, it goes on towards this whole process of confession, right? I mean, and Niu is encouraging people to confess. But then the interesting thing is that she starts confessing herself, right? So it's as if the film then turns from this question of who did it, who slept with my husband, to this other very different question, which is probably a historical one, namely, how did things get this way, right? I mean, why are we all in this position, right? Now, Cheng also said that because of this blank, right, this skip in a generation, what you do is that this blank is filled with the most as a pressing things, which would be sexuality or sexual meaning. But I think in the film and in China itself, you have two things, not just sex, but also politics together. And if you ask the question, what is it that sexuality and politics have in common, I think the answer to that is betrayal. Right? And what is the figure of betrayal in the film? That's why that's a central character in the film, the figure of the husband. Right? Because what the husband stands for, of course, is not just it's personal betrayal, right? But it also becomes a kind of, you can also extend it to the question of political betrayal. Like, for example, with Lala's story, right? The question of the fathers, exactly, right? The fathers and the fathers' generation, these are low communists who are in fact imprisoned, right? Who basically have been betrayed, right, by the state. So the thing that sexuality and politics have in common is that it's always betraying us. As it says, this girl, that the honey of generation have betrayed, right? The honey of generation have betrayed. And of course, the film ends with actually, very interestingly, with a double denouement, right? It's not just one climax, it's two, one following the other, right? The first climax is, who did it? Now, Gaby's right, maybe to complicate it a little bit, but maybe one way of seeing it, who did it? Well, we have the answer, right? It's that particular news. But you see, that is followed by another denouement, another climax, which is much less clear, which is the hysterical breakdown of Lala, right? So she breaks down, and then there's no answer there. I mean, that doesn't constitute an answer. So she breaks down in what? In hysterical laughter, right? And what you then have, what does that mean? I mean, it can mean everything is senseless, or it could mean this other thing, which is like, now what we have is history as hysteria. Right? It's hysterical laughter, and history has become this hysterical thing where you, as it were, have no way of seeing, where anything is. And if you take the question of politics in China, too, as we were saying before, right? It's not as if today we can say, is socialism a life or death? That's not the question. Right? It's not, we're not talking about the life or death of socialism. We're actually talking about the afterlife of socialism. Right? There's a kind of afterlife of socialism which is even stronger than socialism when it was alive. And what are the emblems of this afterlife? There are two emblems, I would say. One would be Mao's body embalmed, right, in Beijing. And the other one, I mean, you could visit this. It's like all these museums in Shanghai and Beijing, which gives us what? Replicas, right? Very detailed replicas of the city itself, right? It's as if this city, which is like growing and it's now fixed. It's this building near the Shanghai Art Museum. That's a 5-story building that gives you a detailed replica of Shanghai. And every major city has that. And it's as if these replicas were a way of embalming the city, as if what we're getting therefore is this not socialism, life or death, but just afterlife, which seems to have a kind of paradoxical vitality, as it were. And it's like some of these things, what Mikey said. I mean, that's one way of one question that we could pose. And I mean, we don't need the panel to be answering all these questions. The discussion to be circulating. Someone wanted to say something.
Okay. It's a question. Well, it's a commentary, but I'd like to hear responses from the Beijingers in the Beijing run in the room, because there's this emphasis on the materiality of memory. We're talking about walls, we're talking about bricks, and it made me thought about yesterday Chang Yong-ho when he was talking about the project in Tiananmen and how he was using the old bricks. So my question would be, as a project, as a design, do you feel that it works? Does this use of old bricks account for these memories, or is it, as Akbar was saying, just embalming as well? Do this use of old bricks in some way reactivate these memories, or is it a joke?
When you started speaking about the courtyard, you mentioned that obviously it's a space from the outside and one goes into the inside, from the inside one goes to the outside, and so on. But I was also thinking of Freud and his little book on civilization and its discontents, where, as he points out, the great tension is between eros and thanatos. Because it seems to me that this film, in some sense, is about transgression and about liminality, the place of liminality in life. There is, it seems to me, constantly this risk of transgression that this film is really talking about. So I was wondering if one might use the courtyard really as a metaphor precisely for liminality and for certain moments of transgression, not simply as a kind of a mediation, if I may put it this way. My second observation is that it seems to me that there is a conflation, which I find a little troubling in much of the discussion, not simply today, but in fact over the course of the last couple of days, between the city and the urban space. Because I want to suggest that, in fact, the city and the urban space are not necessarily the same. They can be quite different. And I can think of very obvious examples, two very different examples that come to mind. One would be Los Angeles, which is certainly an urban space, but there is a very considerable postmodern discussion, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, about why Los Angeles could not, in some respects, be considered a city, if I may put it this way, right? And on the other hand, a very different kind of example that comes to my mind is Indian cities, which in fact, it seems to me, are unintended cities. They're always continuations of the village. All right? Because one thing that you find in Indian cities, if I may put it this way, is how every city is in fact a kind of a ruralized landscape, right? So I would suggest that perhaps some kind of distinction between the urban space and the city might be something that we might want to think about. As with respect to this film as well, but more generally, because it seems to me that the two, in fact, have very different registers about how they work. For example, the role of the pedestrian in the city and in the urban space can be very different.
Because I'm guessing, you're always saying that utilities places out in the countryside, but inside the urban fabric penetrates to them. So that's not the city, but that's the city. Even though it's not a city per se, right? Like in this case, you'll have a courtyard, which is really, to a certain extent, it's included both from history and from the spatial history of the city. A lot of these things that happen in the courtyard could only be like historical events. I mean, it's like, as we were saying, Julie Kristeva would have a hard time making sense of these four women.
Well, I just wanted to thank the panelists first and the discussants. It was a really wonderful discussion and presentation, including the film screening. Triggered some very emotional responses in me. And I wanted to bring the discussion back to this notion of the materiality of memory that the previous question brought up, and that also Gaby and the presenters brought up as sort of linked to temporality. So there is this, you know, the difference in the material aspect of memory across the different generations. So there's a temporal change of the materiality of the memory, of how it is experienced and how it is coming up in the present, how the past in a material sense is coming back into the present. And it's both in a sort of a metaphorical sense and in a very physical and material sense. And I found it very, very intriguing, both about the film and about the discussion. And so I was very curious if maybe one of you guys could speak about the generation now, the generation of the 90s, for example. In my own work, I've been working a lot with digital youth and digital media, and so interacted a lot with the generation of the 80s and 90s as well. And for them, it seemed there was another aspect of materiality, of remembering the past that also was linked to a sort of imagining sort of the political past that many of them don't have like a literal connection to, but hear through stories and hear through TV shows. So there's that sort of more imaginary relationship to the past, but then there also seems the memory or the imagining of that elsewhere, for example, the connection through the internet to other kinds of places that seems very often not just that future rendering of interaction, but very often also of like putting that interaction that is happening online in contrast to the memory of the parents and to the memory of the political past. And I'm not sure if I'm fully clear, but I would love to hear some comments if you guys have any about that particular generation, perhaps, and their relationship to memory.
All right, I wanted to spin on a bit on the thoughts of memory and the recuperability of memory, right? I think there is a tension between two dangers related to memory. One is the absolute erasure and forgetting of memory, right? And the other one is what Akbar described probably as the embalming or encrypting of memory, where you monumentalize it and you, without working through it, basically make it plastic and therefore move on, right? And I think this is something we can see in filmmaking, in literature in China. We can probably also see in architecture. So what I really appreciated about the movie was really the kind of tension kept open between a memory that is glimpsed or sort of like recaptured, but a memory that also remains elusive, that also remains broken, fragmented. For example, in this moment of hysteria, right, where there is the memory sort of in a way creates meaning, but it is not a perfect meaning. So it is either it's neither absolutely lost nor totally recuperated. And I think that's maybe we can draw interesting parallels between that kind of sort of necessary tension in memory with architecture and urban space.
Well, perhaps I just make one remark about the materiality of memory and linking it to stone, and that question is it really is it a joke or is it really a memory? I think very much now along the lines of a conversation we had in Beijing last week with Lu Dan, who will actually come next week to this group, and who is working with stones and who talked about the tradition of spirit rocks and spirit stones, and a kind of it's a very different kind of materiality of memory than, for example, encryptment that also alludes to stones encasing in stone, but in order to make it inaccessible. And what I saw in the movie and in the way Ning Ying talked about the courtyard, the stones still holding the memories after the people are done. It's a relationship of two material objects that become animated because in a way they have absorbed something like the soul of the dead or the soul of a decade or past history. And I think there's something of this sort that comes through in the film and in the images of the courtyard more than in the narratives the women bring up about the courtyard. And I saw something of that kind of relationship also in Ajung's remark. And Lu Dan will do a project here with stones, and actually together with Liu Sola. And I think if we keep this, perhaps the memory of this discussion alive for that presentation, for me, that's how I see the materiality of a different kind of materiality of memory.
I think I want to go back to Xavier's first comment, actually, and tie that to memory. The idea of using stones from old building that's been torn down for new architectural work is not necessarily just to make people who encounter the building remember. It can also be a compromise in the sense that, I mean, I can think of at least one example where Edgar Allan Poe's house was going to be torn down by NYU. There were a lot of protests. So the compromise that they came to was to tear down the house, but use the stones, use the bricks from the house to rebuild a facade and paste it onto a large skyscraper, basically. Now, the great betrayal that happened with that was that after 9/11, when no one had the energy to, fight for this building anymore, they rebuilt the building, but with new bricks. So I think, in some ways, the figure of the stone can signal not just memory, but also betrayal. The second thing that I think is very interesting to talk about is we've been talking about speed and time and memory, and I'm just thinking that in a contemporary context, there's a lot of the problem we have with memory has to do with storage, and memory on a computer, and maybe that would be an interesting way to talk about the problems that we have in relationship to memory. And a third very, very quick thing is that I think sexuality, as that was brought up, you know, to use actually a Chris Davan analysis, there are different modalities of time that are happening. And one of the things that I see in the film is that if, I was very, very impressed with Cheng's presentation yesterday when he talks about animals and how civilization or culture is to keep the animal in check. Well, I interpret that in terms of the drives, in a sense. And by that I mean the drives of appetite, the drives towards murder, the drives towards violence, in other words. And you know, one of the insights I think that is important from Kristeva is that simultaneous to the time of history, to historical time, there's always also the cyclical time of the drives. And I wonder if there's some way to talk about this type of time in relationship to the speed, to the drive towards building and building and building that we see in Chinese cities today.
I abuse my position up here and bring up one topic that hasn't been brought up, and I won't take credit for it because somebody in the audience brought it up. I think Aaron did, and that is the issue of gender. And I think this panel may be able to address it. And after all, we're not talking about just anybody's memory. We're talking about specifically daughter's memory, and quite closely tied to father specifically. And mothers have very shadowy presence here. One is mentioned at first as she, and the father was a you, right? And it's very interesting. And the sort of surrogate mother, Zhang Ma, who serves tea and we assume kills the chicken and so forth, is of course in real life a mother, and not just any mother. So mothers have this very shadowy presence. So what I would love to hear is how director and actor perceive the play of gender and how gender functions in this particular urban space of the courtyard.
Can I quickly add to that? This was also my question, but I want to kind of elaborate on what you just said. And that has to do with a certain tendency I see in several films from all over the world that deal with memory work and work of mourning, particularly when it comes to complicated, traumatized memories. For instance, I'm thinking of films like Thomas Hamilton's German Pale Mother, where you see the same kind of idea. And to go back to Akbar's notion of betrayal, the betrayal itself gets gender in all these narratives in a very specific way, in the sense that the masculine father figure type, here the husband doing double duty. There's a generational difference because it seems like the father was imprisoned for probably talking out against a political order that constituted already a certain kind of betrayal towards community. And then the possibility of community gets gendered also as a certain kind of feminized endeavor. And I understand where this is coming from, but at the same time I wonder if anyone else here feels a little bit uncomfortable about the continuation of a certain kind of gendering. Because we talk about gender differences in convenient ways to criticize certain kinds of mainstream notions or power structures. But when it comes this way, again we kind of lapse into certain kind of essentialized gender positions. Essentialized as the possibility of community, essentialized as betrayal or oppression. So I want to hear a bit more about that.
燕燕，你说吧。
你稍微翻一下，那个太理论我根本听不懂。
就是说那个我刚才说的意思就是你明白我的意思就是，
你那个我听
对，他那个意思就是说，他说那个他有点质疑的意思，他就是说这个记忆和缅怀，他明白你们的意思就是这个背叛是有性别的，就是 代表权力的那个形象是一个父亲的形象，但是父亲也是一个被这个党和权力所背叛的一个形象。完了，
而且这是一个男性为主的电影。
哎，他觉得他的
一个男性为主的电影，就这意思。
而且他就认为你这个大致的结构是。就是从性别观点来看，这个大致的结构比较像主流思维的形式，而不是反叛的形式。
就那男的也是背叛者，那父亲也是受害者。解释吧。你不管了。解释吧。
你说话态度好点了。那个，you know, this film when finished, part of the audience says, "Oh, it's a very feminist Chinese film," because it's obviously the present figure in the film are all female. You can listen only the female. They are talking about their desire, their memory, their past, their drug, their sexual stupid things, or intelligent things. So it's but then another part of the audience says no. It's a very because the story in the end, all of them desire have a husband, so they're looking for who betrayed, etc. I would say, you know, obviously I'm a woman, and that is a basic point of view. So why you doubt about it? No, I can also understand why you doubt, because you have seen so many television melodrama talking about the issue, and in a certain way, indeed, this film, I said also the story is designed in a certain way, because a film is also an industry product. When finished, it has to see the audience, has to be screened in the theater. So I cannot begin the film says, in my film only 4 women talking about their memories. So the story is designed at the first part. It's like a typical melodrama, try to hide its real face, or try to let the audience be calm, says, okay, I will see again another drama story, melodrama story, and that like every television film, and then I can enjoy just 1 hour and a half. But I think deeply in our film, I always say it's our film, try to convince also Sola, it's a piece of our our memory. But we have to hide this part in the film, and then just step by step, let the audience to be aware, oh, I'm in some point different. It's a different film. It's a much more, or as Gaby's word, it's much more deeper. It has some much more complicated message in it. It's not just a melodrama story. So somehow, film always has this 1 hour and a half. You have to tell in something, and you have to telling a story can contain in this time, in this way of telling. It's already established. It's that language. I have to talk in English with you. Even my English is just a low level, but it's our try to communicate with each other. Also film in that way. So you have a huge limitation when you design a story. And you have to follow, first of all, what is already language established. And then you try to put your real intention in it. So I say, if you get I say 2 kind of audience. If you get first part of audience, you are intelligent. If you get the second part of audience, you are a little bit mainstream mentality. That is what I'm thinking.
And perhaps, I mean, on the issue of betrayal, just to complicate it a bit, at least I understood the core of betrayal moves. It starts out with the cliche of the husband having an affair, and the more the women talk, the betrayal moves to the woman who betrays her woman friend by having the affair with the husband. And especially in New News transformation. She becomes more obsessed with that the longer she talks with her friends. And I think a core scene is the one in which Lala approaches Niu and tries to seduce her. And then there's this intimate moment where Niu says, whom would you kill? And she said, I would kill the one I don't like and keep the other one. And that's, I mean, that turn complicates for me the whole cliche of the cheating husband and takes it a little out, makes it, I mean, it brings many other desires, including triangulation into the play. And Lala says explicitly, perhaps she wanted to get your attention, you know. That's very, for me, it's important in the sexual politics of the film.
Hi. My question, I know there's already been a lot of discussion in regard to memory, and we just talked about memory in relation to gender. My question is in regard to memory in relation to issues of class. And here's kind of my larger question, and then I will kind of explain why I'm posing this question. My question is, in what ways is memory or the preservation of memory itself already a privileged act? And the reason I'm asking this this question is that Ning Lao Shi, you mentioned that, you know, this idea of like coming home and somehow home is no longer recognizable and it's in some way very horrific. And that really resonated with me because I left Beijing when I was 14. And when I was growing up, my family, actually 3 generations of my family, lived in a very tiny apartment in Beijing. And of course, Beijing has changed so much. And a few years ago, my grandparents' apartment was torn down because of all the reconstructions that were taking place in the city. And I think even though I personally I was feeling very sad about it, and my grandmother was also feeling very sad about it, but as a result, she was able to get money to buy a much larger apartment. So in some ways, I think the feelings are very, very conflicted. Because on the one hand, there is the desire to hold on to that memory, but on the other hand, the living situation is much better. So, I just wanted to ask this question. In what ways is this idea of preserving memory connected to kind of issues of class and privilege?
不是吧？是贵族才有机会表达出来的吧？因为记忆都有的，是人，这是记忆是人的一个人体功能啊。但是就是说，谁有权利表达出来？是这个意思是吧？不是这意思。啊，不是这个。
阶层或者是精英所有的东西，或者是贵族才有的东西，对不对？是阶层的意思是吗？
阶级。
想说是阶层，阶层还是阶级？你想说的是什么？中文课。问题是 class 这个。 The term class has too many different ramifications in Chinese because of our own fairly recent past. So this is why I was translating it as of your question into Chinese, not as the classical Marxist rendition of class, but as aristocratic or elitist because of its other connotations. But Cheng's retake on it is to say that it is not the preserve of the elites, that memory is not the preserve of the elite, but the ability or the power or the resources to express, to give expression to the memory is often the exercise of the elites.
I read the betrayal a little bit differently. I read the obvious and I guess I don't know if shallow is the right word, as the father, but I thought that the mothers were actually the deeper betrayals because I felt like their bodies held a lot of memories that were untapped and not talked about, and they were kind of like living dead. And so I was wondering, is the mother, is that like a decaying old institution that will fall away, or is the future of the daughters in the film to become the mothers and to become those that are not, that are going to betray either their daughters or each other?
Hi, my name is Erin. In fact, I have a pretty different question. I have a question about the filming of the face in particular. I will begin by this comparison between the focus on the courtyard. I mean, there has been a lot of discussion about the film being spatial and the courtyard related to how to remember or retrieve past memories. But one thing that's very interesting that I noticed from the film is the filming of the body, actually. There's a lot of focus on woman's face. And then since Ning Ying mentioned that this is a film made based on friendship, female friendship. But in the film, when you see the woman, it is filmed in a very, I would say, unfamiliar way. So for example, you see these almost animalistic portrayal of woman's behavior eating the chicken feet, the fragmentation of the face, for example, specific focus on the movement of the mouth, these extreme close-ups of laughter, etc. So my question is, so in the context of filming between friends, how do you actually relate or bring up the body as also another spatial trope in the film?
我用中文问吧，就是问电影这个结局或者尾声的时候，就是说这个女孩司机是18岁的一个女孩。然后一个丈夫出轨，然后我是不是可以设想，作为观众设想这是一个结局，或者说是也是一个隐喻，就是说对北京这个城市的一个隐喻。那我们说很多胡同的这个问题，那么胡同代表记忆。那这个女孩，这个司机，如果她是一个，如果也算是个人物的话，因为大家都在猜测他们都到底是是谁背叛了这个朋友。突然，如果变成一个局外的人，那这个女孩是不是也是18岁的女孩，是一个北京未来的一个隐喻？就是说，她的命运是这样的，还是这个男主角是隐喻北京的未来？这是我的猜测。然后我不知道你们拍摄的时候有没有这一个想法？为什么找一个非常年轻的一个女孩来代表一个出轨的男人的一个结局？ So this is a question about the ending or the possible ending of the film. The teenager or the 18-year-old driver who was in the car with the husband, and my speculation is that's the affair, you know, and I sort of read it as a metaphor for the city of Beijing because all this memory talk about courtyard and preserving memory, but this is actually about the future. And if this ending of the husband who has an affair with a really young girl, is that the metaphor for Beijing as a future, as a city? I just wanted to hear about that from you, if you thought about this in constructing the film, because there were a lot of demolitions going on during this film was being produced. So, so not so much about the construction of the film, but the future that you imply with this film.
I explained a little bit how we shoot the movie. First question was about mother and father, and actually you're all asking about the character father and mother. Because actually maybe you can maybe helpful for you think about design, because when we decide to shoot a movie, we decide to completely improvise the whole thing. Each of us just receive one page of paper, and then Ning Ying just gave us a schedule, and then you arrive here today, makeup, and then bring what, and today is daytime, lunchtime, and dinner, and the story is about. For example, cry or whatever. So that's basically a description of today what we do, and then we improvise, and that's why lots of truths come out. Like you can't help with her like really brutally what's that word? 虐待. Yeah. Basically abuse us, right? Doing the shooting.
I have a totally different memory.
So it's like, that's why all the truths come out. We amateurs, we never act in the movie. We never know how to shoot a movie and be an actress. So we only know friendship. So basically, when she asked her to do something, we just trying very hard to think of what we can do. Like this mother-father thing, basically she locked me into the toilet and then locked me into a very small room, and then said, talk, and then there's shooting, and then say, okay, nobody come into the room, and then she's going to say, talk about the mother and father. So during that time, because I think my family story is lots of my friends now, because at that time my father died for a long time ago. So most of my memory was about my father. My mom was she's a writer, and I don't want to get into detail, but my mom been isolated deliberately 14 years, doesn't want to see people. And lots of the sentence I used is her real sentence. For example, she lay down in bed and think about my father, said, oh, how could he die for 100 years? Oh, that kind of sentence. It's a real sentence from every day my mom will say something like that. So that's why I just naturally, without any preparation, I just started talk what's in my mind. So, come to this kind of event, then it's become you guys, study theory and critic, whatever. So you upgrade our mind into theory, we didn't think about much. It's just like, let's do it, She was shocked every day. How could all this story digging out and just talking? And then she got lots of, I think, 10 times more material with her. We thought we were making a comedy. I don't know why it come out as a tragedy. Really, it's like we all confused. I was wow. About this chicken, now this is mother, father, I can say this question you asked, the chicken thing, about the language. The funny thing, why we repeat this ugly face and to eat chicken, because actually it's also, when you think about design in China, the part of you may concern, because look at our generation. I think maybe younger generation also have a big influence by the damage of our generation, because we all been sent to the countryside during the Cultural Revolution. When you send to the countryside, first gesture you have to make is you have to score. It's in English scoring, squat, 蹲着, squat. Anybody can squat? You can't, no, can you? I think most of you can from India, of course you can. I'm sorry, I'm not a scholar. Totally political and incorrect. So it's just like, we all can squat, we have to eat with the farmer and workers. That's a symbolic, you can mix with the farmer and workers. So you squat first day, whole day, no chairs, okay? You don't sit down on the floor, you have to squat. That's very ugly for girls, right? But we all trained like that. And then you can't eat, when I was little, I tried to eat like this. That's the traditional training, you eat like this, and That's the Chinese traditional eating, and then you cannot do your arm like this. You have to say like this is the traditional style. But during the Cultural Revolution, you cannot do that. You really have to eat like this, and then laugh and eat at the same time, talk, and then put your you try to put your leg on your table or whatever. I showed I'm a very macho, and I'm a So this. We completely have a style change during the 10 years. So after 10 years, you look at university students. When I was in the university, all of us, when we eat, our face is really ugly when we eat. So I still have this habit. Sometimes when I eat comfortably, I really don't look good. So that's why I deliberately bring this habit into her camera. I said, look, we know fashion, now we dress well, and we come from overseas, and we look so fashionable, trendy, whatever, so look like, civilized. But actually, this is a deep down habit. When I was childhood, I was in the countryside, I tried to eat like this, right? So that's why we deliberately doing it to show what is the real us. That's the chicken leg story. And 18 years old girl, I think Ning Ying should make conclusion about that.
18 years.
Okay.
No, to answer the last question is quite easy. It's a banal choice. It's happened to a lot of people, and just like that, intellectual man around 60s, 50s, and then have crisis, and then finish with a young girl, and then they all go death. So it's very...